Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This is part 2 of turning Magic the Gathering colors into magical girls. Over in part 1, I drew red, blue, and green, so if you guys haven't seen it, I highly recommend that you guys do. I'll link the video somewhere in this video and down below in the description. In this video, I will be drawing white and black, which I can say I definitely went a bit extra with this, and I honestly don't regret it one bit. I am a bit worried it might have steered away from magical girl theme, but I'll have you guys be the judge of that. I'm not gonna hold you guys from the speed paints for too long like I did last time. I'm actually pretty excited and anxious for you guys to see the results, so let's go ahead and get started. First up, or third up in correlation with part 1, we have white, which represents order and vigilance. While I was coming up with ideas for her, I knew that in every magical girl group there's always going to be a leader, someone who can guide, inspire, and motivate others towards a shared goal, and I knew white was perfect for the role. From what I researched about the color, white puts so much value into like groups and civilization as a whole and strongly believes in peace within the world. In order for white to accomplish that goal, there needs to be structure amongst the community, which breaks into like several concepts like morality, order, uniformity, and structure. To put this into a simpler perspective, white is the typical hero in a superhero movie, where they bring justice towards evil and bring world peace for the civilians or the innocent. With that knowledge in mind, for this character, I knew I wanted her to be this tall and strong gal, someone who is willing to protect others like a shield and fight through enemies as their sword. It gave me the idea of like a strong knight because of how vigilant they are, and honestly I just wanted an excuse to give her armor. On top of that, angels are pretty common in magic, regardless of like the themes like sci-fi, eldritch, gothic horror, so why not do an angel theme magical girl, you know? I mean, I feel like it's pretty typical to have an angel because, I mean, you have Usagi from Sailor Moon with her final form and Madoka from Madoka Magica, so I think I'm pretty clear on this one. White in this universe used to be a transfer student to the same school as red, blue, and green. I want to say her dad used to be a police officer or some sort of like an authoritative type of job, either a fireman or something like that, and either retired because something happened to him physically, or if I want to go a more darker route and sad route, he died. Either way, White definitely looks up to her dad like a hero, and she strives to be just like him. And I guess like to go back to the topic of like her being a transfer student, most likely after the passing or maybe his retirement, her dad's retirement, they had to relocate to a different city or new neighborhood, which then White has to adapt to this new lifestyle, a new area she's never been, so yeah, I kind of wanted to add more into that. She's very optimistic, she's very compassionate and very polite. She's always seen like volunteering to help with the community, whether it be like food banks or like teaching kids in daycares or something like that, anything to like give back to the people. I also view her as like the type of friend who'll be a caretaker essentially. If her friends get drunk, she'll be the one to stay sober and drive everyone home and make sure that they rest up for the night and just be taken care of, essentially. White believes the world can be safe and peaceful if the right people can step up and make it happen. She wants to be that person, she wants to be that missing link to make it happen and rid all evil and corruption, but she just didn't know how she could do it as a normal girl. She still tries her damnness to be this kind of like a beacon of hope to these people despite her being ordinary. That is until she was chosen to become a magical girl because of her passion to protect the world and bring peace. When she obtained the power, she became very proud and very confident in protecting innocence against evil. She finally obtained that missing piece, and now she can finally be that hero. She is definitely a good person with benevolent intentions, but I believe that can also be her biggest weakness. Despite having such an optimistic perspective in life and believing that the world needs saving or whatnot, I believe her to be extremely naive and very hell-bent on making sure that order is intact, which then you start to notice that she can be pretty controlling, especially when it comes to her group when they're like fighting evil, whether it be a ordinary criminal or be a monster or anything in the magical girl anime. It's like she wants to make sure that her group stays within a certain structure, a certain rule on what you can and can't do when bringing justice to them. She believes evil will always be evil and must be punished for their crimes as an act of justice, even though there's still a chance for repentance. White definitely has a very, I want to say, like, simple perspective where evil is evil and good is good. But we all know that it's a lot more complicated than that, and to White, knowing that it's a lot more complicated, it does rile her up a bit or make her feel flustered, which then kind of like, essentially it's kind of like ruining her routine where she feels out of place. She feels like this is not right, this is wrong, but am I doing something wrong? Or like, I think that there are times where she would steer away any faults, I guess, because she's like this, you know, angel magical girl. She's like a beacon of hope to these people, and basically trying to keep that front alive and high, and anything that disrupt that, she just, you know, tries her best to just not let that happen, you know. But anyways, after White was transferred to the school, Blue was the first person to introduce herself, and the two immediately hit it off as friends. She definitely respects how Blue thinks progressively, believing that it would be beneficial towards world peace, because Blue thinks that there is a greater improvement when it comes to progressing, whereas it's like kind of like technology, and that it can really improve society, and White thinks that it's pretty impressive, and she agrees with it wholeheartedly. As for Green, she does appreciate White's defense towards like nature and tradition, because White believes it's not all bad to have your traditions, and that nature is still a part of the world, and so Green really felt appreciated and felt like White understands her in that regard. For Red, however, there is some tension between the two. I wouldn't say it's not very strong, like someone that I will be talking about later in this video, only because White can't really get by Red's aggressive nature and her fiery passion to her like desires. So I guess this is another example of White being controlling, is White has to constantly make sure that Red has to reel back those heavy hitters to prevent any like killing blows. Green and Blue, however, they do have Red's back and always there to defend her. So White learns to tolerate Red's behavior for the most part, but she doesn't 100% agree with Red's erratic behavior. When I imagine how or what her powers can do, I would say she would emanate this light, like this bright light, whether it be herself or it be like the weapons. Like she will like burst into light, and that light heals people surrounding her. From what I've researched about White, like in Magic the Gathering, it's mainly trying to prevent any like prolonged warfare and hates to kill, hence why White prevents Red from doing any attacks that can kill, because she's against that. But it has ways to break down defenses and retaliate any upcoming enemy attacks, so kind of like reflecting the attack back. So it's not necessarily her making the attacks, she's just making the enemy's attack bounce back to hit them. You know what I mean, right? She basically is this beacon that boosts up her allies, and she stays within range to give off that boost. So like she's usually like up in the air, and below her you see allies being like boosted with like some power-ups and heals and all that. Of course I didn't want her to be completely defensive, so obviously she knows how to fight back in enemy combat, but she tries to let red do all the heavy hitting, and white just prefers to be as passive as possible, even though that's not really how it works when you're in combat sometimes, but hey. As for her design, like I said, I wanted to give her armor just so that I can sort of fit that angel aesthetic with like a sword and shield. I also didn't want to go overboard with it because I don't want to stray away from the magical girl theme, so I only did pieces instead of doing like the full armor. It looked pretty plain, so I went and added some filigree details to make it look a bit more elegant and complement with the existing details surrounding it. Like the previous 3 magical girls I designed in part 1, I need to incorporate uniformity between them, so I gave white the typical schoolgirl skirt and the collar that complements the palette, and the plain white top with the gold jewel on the center that has her symbol. And when I added the wings, the whole design is just giving me like Valkyrie vibes, which I just absolutely love, and I figured that the way that I portray her, especially with the pose and the face that she's like showing, it does give off Valkyrie vibes, because Valkyries are all like strong female warriors that guide like brave soldiers that die from battle into Valhalla just so that they can fight whatever battles is in Valhalla. I think, don't quote me on that, I am not an expert in Norse mythology, I just read what I saw. The weapons, when I designed the weapons, I noticed that there weren't any cute elements to the design, so I had to fix that by doing it with the weapons. It's typical for swords to have wings with a big gemstones from what I've seen in like magical girl animes, so I just had to do it for this one for the sake of getting into the theme. For the shield, I kind of just did one of those like go with the flow type methods where I just draw and hope it works out in the end, but I did want to include a sun symbol because that is like a representation of white, and so I knew I had to add that, and everything else is just like, let's see where it leads or whatever, and I'd say it's not too bad, you know. Despite white being the main color, I knew I had to make the color palette more interesting instead of just being white. Because the symbol is a sun, I knew that I have to add like colors of like yellow and gold, anywhere around that warm tone color, and to ensure that it's not just yellow, you know, I need to add some sort of balance, some sort of accent to complement the bright colors, and so I decided to go with brown. I really like how the yellows are making her give off this radiant glow like a sun. She's pretty much a light beacon to the innocent, and because of that, they praise her as their protector. Overall, I'm very happy how she turned out. There are some errors here and there that I made in this drawing for sure, but I think it's not enough to like bother me at all, you know. Last and certainly not least is black, which represents power and sacrifice. Typically, she would be considered the villain of the story if you read the description of what black represents. Black is mainly orientated towards obtaining power within oneself, basically selfishness. It believes that there are necessary steps to accomplish self-growth, even if it's immoral, like, you know, betrayal and killing, like anything that white is against. It's willing to pay the cost no matter how extreme it's going to be. So unlike white, black is always ready to face the ugly side of the world because it's naturally part of life. It has a pretty cynical view of the world, which is primarily negative, but that's what makes black a bit more complicated than that, because it may seem like black is the villain, but to me, it sounds like black is just a realist. Sometimes the idea you have in mind about something or someone, or just an idea in general, it's not always going to be that way. because a lot of times it's just like fantasy thinking. Not saying all, but there are a lot of people out there who have like this sort of imaginary world, or have like this strong idea of what the world is going to be, and it actually ends up being not as the same, I guess. And that's exactly how I designed this character. Black is a complicated character due to her past experiences in childhood. Now, it's gonna be dark, fair warning, but it's not going to be graphic, but it makes sense for the topic for her. I want to say Black and White used to be childhood friends in the past, and they often spend so much time together like sisters. White has a pretty well-off family life with a caring father and a loving mother who love their daughter, whereas Black's is pretty complex. I want to say that she grew up with a single mom, and her dad was out of the picture for reasons that Black didn't know until something happened. Life was pretty rough for Black and for her mom because, you know, it's just the two of them. The mom is struggling to find work to support her daughter, but the two managed to live life to the fullest. I want to give her this dream that she wanted to be a dancer, because I think as a kid she grew up, fell in love with like those classic ballet concerts, like I think it's like the Swan Lake, there you go, Swan Lake and Nutcracker and all of that. And her mom was there to always support her, and so you would see her like as a kid wearing like these poofy dresses, and like she has dancing shoes that her mom saved up all the money she could muster and give her these shoes as like a birthday present. Like it's just a very like sentimental thing that Black always cherishes. Sadly, this is where things started to go downhill for her, because the dad, unbeknownst to Black, has been searching for them, and the mom did everything to prevent them from being found, and so she's constantly having to move houses and always having to lie to Black, worrying that she wouldn't really understand that her dad isn't a good person, and she didn't want her daughter to, you know, have that memory or that idea that her dad is evil, because you know she was a child at the time. She wanted to keep her mind fresh and free from any memories or experiences that she's too young to experience, you know what I mean? Black's mom would always try to get help from like the police officers or some sort of authority, but nothing was being done, because since nothing was happening to her or put her family in danger at all, the police officers can't really do anything. You know, that typical police officer behavior. Not saying all police officers are like that, but it's unfortunately a very common thing that happens in the police force. So because of that, this ultimately led to Black's mom being killed by the dad. This was the moment where Black's perspective of life shifted, realizing that the world was not entirely good like how White perceived it to be. I didn't want her to be an orphan, so I planned for Black to just end up living with her aunt, who is pretty wealthy, and because she's wealthy, Black just had to give her that side eye and have some sort of feeling of disdain towards her, only because her aunt has all this money, and not once had she tried to reach out to her mom and help during the rough times. Now, it could be because maybe the mom rejected help from the sister, but we don't know. Regardless, she didn't really have like a close relationship with her aunt. She tolerated this new lifestyle and adapted fairly quickly. She did manage to achieve her goals as a famous dancer, primarily ballet, all on her own, and because, you know, she was very driven with a goal, she has that goal to become one, and she would rather do it on her own. She didn't want anyone to help her. She thinks that she can do it just fine. As a result of being this famous dancer, she gained a lot of popularity in school and, you know, the media and stuff like that. But she doesn't allow anyone to get close to her, because she knows that those people that try to, like, you know, win her friendship, it wouldn't be genuine at all. They're only there for gaining something, whether it be like money or like favors or fame, like anything like that. So she mostly just kept to herself, and she preferred prefers it that way. And honestly, I don't blame her. I want to say that Black got her magical girl powers long before anyone else did. And because of that, there has been some activities of criminals being handled in a rather extreme way. Basically, I see her as an anti-hero or a vigilante, someone who just takes law into her own hands, meaning that there are no limitations or rules on how she deals with evil. Only because of her experiences with law enforcement back then with her mom, she definitely has like a huge distrust towards them, and so she just wanted to take things into her own hands. Her identity remains a mystery, however. I mean, if you're gonna take law into your own hands, you have no choice but to keep your identity a secret, otherwise you'll be arrested by authorities, and she did not want that. It came to no surprise that White has a clear disgust, like White did not like how Black is handling justice and believes that they are just the same level as criminals, but White doesn't know that it was Black, her former close friend. Anyways, when Black got transferred to the same school as everyone, I would say it's probably like months after White. It definitely came as a shock for the two to be suddenly reunited. White certainly would have been pretty happy to see Black again because, you know, it's been years and they were friends, and she suddenly disappeared on her, so she had no way to contact her. And so it made sense for White to be like, hey, like, it's been such a long time. Where have you been? How you been doing? But Black didn't reciprocate the same feelings, which left White feeling very confused. Black is aware of White's very strong obsession with justice and her association with like trying to be like her dad, who's a police officer. Like, she definitely would not, you know, try to converse with White, or nor does she want to be her friend. Again, when White found out that Black was the one behind the vigilante works, there was definitely a nasty dispute between them. Tension grew and the pair only shared hatred towards one another. Though I don't know, hatred is the right word, but they definitely have like opinions with one another, like towards one another, that they can agree to disagree, but they just can't get along. As for Red and Blue and Green, Black doesn't necessarily have an issue with Blue and Red. She agrees with Blue's realistic logic when it comes to growth, and she certainly respects Red's fiery passion, you know. However, for Green, Black doesn't necessarily dislike her, but she doesn't pay her no mind, solely because she couldn't care less for spiritualism or nature. Black in combat is all about being tactical, using any available resources around her. I imagine her sinking or melting into the shadows and using it as a way to escape, or to implement sneaky attacks from behind. She definitely uses like a lot of shadow manipulations for sure, just so that there's enough shadow and darkness for her to use at her disposal, whether it be for like evasion or a sneak attack, like I said. She's not the type to charge in like Red. She has to depend a lot of sneakiness and using a lot of dexterity to be nimble. Since Black in Magic the Gathering has connections to necromancy, so like raising the dead, I think Black is able to do just that, except it's a very risky power to use. Anytime she uses necromancy, a bit of her life essence will be used to summon the dead, because in the way that Black works in Magic the Gathering, you have to pay the cost, and a lot of times it's like using a lot of mana or you lose health points, kind of like that. And so Black, who isn't afraid to make sacrifices or make any like paying any extreme cost, she's willing to do so, and she can just easily kill off those undead easily. But she tries not to use it as much because, again, it's a very risky move, and so she only uses it when necessary. Now, for this design, this was definitely a challenge for me, mostly because I definitely was overthinking it pretty hard. For whatever reason, I didn't think Magical Girl and Goth can mix. I don't know why. I'm so stupid. I was so stupid. When you literally have like pastel goths and gothic Lolitas, you know? It's probably because I was looking through basically like the Innistrad Black cards for Magic the Gathering and saw how none of the artworks matches with the word cutesy. I felt pretty stupid when I realized the amount of worrying over this design, because like you would think that this would be a walk in the park for me, because I mean, look at me, I love dark colors and gothic fashion and anything like dark fantasy. This really shouldn't be as stressful as I made it out to be. But I will say the hardest part coming up with this character is how I can have Black be her own individual but still have somewhat similarities with everyone else. Majority of the time Black will be on her own because again she's a vigilante and an anti-hero, so she wouldn't really associate herself with, you know, the gang who goes by a certain order, a certain structure. But there will be times where she'll be fighting alongside of everyone because a lot of times it's necessary to do so. This was definitely the biggest challenge for me, and I think I did pretty well, you know? Anyways, I managed to get out of the chaos and finally came up with this design where I put in elements of gothic Lolita and sort of that ballerina because of the skirt I gave her and the backstory where she is a famous ballerina dancer. I also wanted her to basically be the opposite of white in terms of appearance, personality, and beliefs. I didn't want to be too cliche where you have the typical angel versus devil. It's been overdone and pretty repetitive, so I decided on the idea of a reaper, hence the scythe and the cloak. There aren't many magical girls that have scythe for a weapon. I thought Sailor Saturn used the scythe at some point, but it turned out to be a glaive instead, so nevertheless, I believe scythes are perfect for Black, and I find that weapon to be extremely badass and elegant at the same time. Depending on the size of the blade, I think momentum is being used a lot to ensure that the weapon's being used properly, and because of that I always see a lot of scythe users being like they're dancing in combat, so I had to incorporate that into her pose, which by the way was also very challenging for me. I had to make sure the angle of the body was right and the legs were proportionally correct. It's a pretty dynamic pose that I don't do at all, but I'm pretty proud of how it looked. I'm sure there are mistakes in here for sure, because again I don't draw that many dynamic poses and I'm still learning, but I think it looks great. Because I went with a Reaper theme, I knew I had to implement some kind of cloak or a hood to cover her face. I thought about a hood at first, but I changed my mind and went with a cloak. A lot of Reaper depictions, aside from a skull face, their faces are always hidden underneath a hood or hidden like underneath shadow. And like how I mentioned about hiding her identity, the cloak is there to hide her face. I didn't want it to be just a blank fabric, so I decided to add lace to make it interesting and make it more of that gothic elegance. The cloak is supposed to be darker, but I didn't want it to cover her pretty hair, so I just made it opaque enough to, you know, show it off. The details I added on the legs before I decided to change it, I had no idea what to do with it, nor had I known what exactly I wanted. So it was another one of those go with the flows, and this time the results I did not like. I looked up some gothic Lolita shoes to gather some inspiration along with like ballerina shoes. Thus I went with straps that's like wrapped around half of her calves. It definitely matches the dancing Lolita doll a whole lot better. Same with the corset. I don't know why I decided to go with whatever it was that I thought of before. I don't know how to describe it, so I'll just show it somewhere in this video. This is what I went with, and it ended up being very messy. I did another sketch for some corset designs and I decided to go with this one. To make it less simple, I added like this gemstone with like these chains wrapped around the waist. I want to say that's one of my favorite parts of the design, along with the skirt. I think it's really cute and it just matches with what I was going for. I know this is going to sound cheesy or cliche, but I'm gonna say it anyway. I added roses to her design because I love roses and it shows off elegance so well. She may be beautiful enough to attract people, but if they get too close, her thorns will prevent them from getting closer. Every roses has their thorns and hers are pretty lethal and poisonous. Speaking of, I did something interesting with her hands. Poison decks in Magic the Gathering is a thing you can do where you have cards that put and build up poison counters onto your opponent. If they accumulate like 10 or more poison counters, you lose the game. It's basically another win condition. It can be pretty easy to build up with that many counters, but you just gotta make sure you have the right cards and the right play, obviously. Anyways, I wanted to incorporate that somehow into design, and I came up with the idea of her hands implementing poison to her enemies. Like, her fingers are long and sharp enough so that with a simple swipe will instantly plant poison into them. It will slowly build up inside until it reaches to max, which she honestly uses this as a way to torture and like gain intel. It's pretty brutal and messed up, but she has the antidote, so she's not always trying to kill them unless they deserve it. As far as the color palette goes, I didn't want it to be entirely black and white, even though I almost did. I wanted to add in like purple / violet because it fits in that aesthetic that I am going for, and it's also the opposite of yellow, so it's like, why not? Originally, I was going to make the metal bits gold like everyone else's, but it was just clashing too much with the other colors. It was taking away the attention from everything else because everything is so dark that the gold is like popping out, and I didn't want that to happen. So I went and changed it to silver. When I mentioned that black got her magic powers first, I figured that silver will help solidify her being separated from the others, but still has that same magical girl elements that everyone else has. I'm very glad that I went with that choice. I love a girl with her own individualism, so it's no surprise that she's my favorite. And with that, here are the final results of Whites and Black's design. If you guys make it this far into the video, thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy the speed paint and my excessive rambling. After doing part 1, I definitely felt more confident in drawing these two as magical girls, despite some challenges here and there. I went all out for sure, especially with White, and I'm pretty proud of myself. I forgot to mention this in the beginning of the video, but I am recovering from being sick, and so I have this nasty cough, and so if I sound different, that's why. But whenever I make these types of videos, I just love how I created a sort of universe for these characters and create like a story that correlate with them and one another. That's one of my favorite things I love to do besides drawing characters. It's just storytelling. It wouldn't be a surprise if I end up making a Magic Girl anime story with these girls. Who knows when that'll happen? Maybe soon or later down the future. Who knows? But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you guys would like to see more videos like this, make sure you like the video and subscribe to my channel and hit that bell for notifications so you don't miss out on any of my videos. Stay tuned for the next video. Since spooky season is coming up, I do have an idea in mind that I'd love to do. It's going to require a lot of researching, and so it's gonna take some time for sure, but I know it'll be worth it in the end, so definitely look out for that. And with that, I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Bye bye.